the bakery that we got our bread from. It's all natural, no preservatives, no trans fats. And on the back of it, it says, plant a garden, walk to work. So people are getting involved in this type of thinking. And that's what we want. Plant a garden, walk to work. Are you up here already?
Yeah.
Oh, you quick. So Suzanne has a company called Barefoot Gardener, and what she does is she thinks differently than most landscapers. Because most landscapers and landscape designers, you know, you got the green lawn, you got your normal trees, your taxus, your junipers, you know, that kind of stuff. You know, it's almost the same. You know, it's the homogenization of America. What Suzanne does is she removes that from people's properties and puts wild areas in. We always have a graduate class at her house. You know, the first night is usually at her house, and she has a property that is wild all over it, and she'll talk more about that. And the elementals are there in force. It's an amazing place. One time she was giving a talk, and I was at the school, and I got there a little bit late. And she's in a cherry tree giving the talk. She's standing in the top of, in the middle of a cherry tree, and everybody's underneath her, like looking up, and she's talking from the cherry tree, which I'd never seen before. So it's pretty interesting how she looks at things in a non-traditional way, and it's actually the way we have to look at things. And she'll explain how she did it, and why she did it, and where she came from. So without further ado, Suzanne Ruggles, the Barefoot Gardener from West Hampton Beach.
So I just want to say this prayer before we start. This is an Onondaga prayer. Greetings and thanks to each other as people, to the earth, mother of all greetings and thanks. To all the waters, waterfalls and rain, rivers and oceans, greetings and thanks. To all the fish life, greetings and thanks. The grains and greens, beans and berries, as one we send thanks to the food plants. Medicine herbs of the world and their keepers, greetings and thanks. To all animals and their teachings, greetings and thanks. The trees for shelter and shade, fruit and beauty, greetings and thanks. To all birds, large and small, joyful greetings and thanks. And from the four directions, the four winds, thank you for purifying the air we breathe and giving us strength. Greetings. The thunderers, our grandfathers in the sky, we hear your voices. Greetings and thanks. And now the sun, for the light of a new day and all the fires of life. Greetings and thanks. To our oldest grandmother, the moon, leader of women all over the world, and all the stars for their mystery, beauty, and guidance. Greetings and thanks. To our teachers from all times, reminding us of how to live in harmony. Greetings and thanks. And for all the gifts of creation, and for all the love around us, greetings and thanks. For that which is forgotten, we remember. We end our words, and now our minds are one. So, I love nature. I'm a nature girl. I'm a nature spirit. And I got into gardening because I thought I was going to be in nature. But it didn't take long for me to realize that what most people consider landscaping is against nature. We try to control nature, and in so doing, landscaping has become a tyrannical force upon the earth. We're destroying ecosystems with our quote-unquote landscaping, instead of being the stewards of the earth that we're meant to be. So this started with me because I lived on right out of college, I lived on a vacant farm. It was about 20 acres, and it had been vacant for 30 years. And I had this little cottage right in the middle of it. And I would spend all my time walking the fields because there were tall grasses, and there was abundant plant and insect life and mammals, and I would find bones and explore. It was just fascinating to me. I was always looking down at the biodiversity there, just incredible. And I didn't see any point in mowing my little patch. Besides, I was just out of college. I didn't really want to spend money on a lawnmower. So what happened was there were just wildflowers everywhere. And with the wildflowers, there were butterflies, and there were little mammals eating leaves, and insects pollinating flowers. And to me, that was just so life-affirming, and the energy and the vibration of the place was just, you could feel it. It was just life. I've always just wanted a home that was teeming with life, and I had it there. And I was working at a garden center, and one day I came home, and one of my neighbors had mowed my lawn. And I went into mourning. I was so sad. I mourned for a long time until it grew back again. And a few weeks later, sure enough, somebody mowed it down again. And nobody would admit that they mowed it, which is interesting. That's so that they knew that I didn't want it mowed, but they felt it was a social responsibility and that they were going to take care of this for the neighborhood, even though it was beautiful. So ingrained is this notion that we have to have a lawn on every property. It has to look, a certain way. And it's the antithesis of nature. So when I bought my own property, the first thing I did was put a privacy screen around, and I just let things go. And I recreated what I had experienced many years before on that vacant farm. It came to life. So that's what started this process for me. Just about that time, I read in the local newspaper that the Southampton Town Board was passing a law that everyone had to have a lawn. And in fact, to this day, you can't get a CO in the town of Southampton unless you have a lawn. So I thought, I'm going to be an outlaw if they pass this. So I started to do research, went online, and I knew that there would be evidence online to support what I was experiencing because it felt so right. And of course there was. There's so much information online just to support the ecosystem rather than what I call the ego system. So I went to the town board and I read them a whole bunch of information, which I'm going to share with you today. And they did pass the law anyway. That's how ingrained the lawn is. And actually, it turns out having a lawn is a New York State law. So it's my ultimate goal to change that law. I'm not saying that if you have a lawn, you're an outlaw. I just don't want to have a lawn. I want us to have a choice. I want us to be able to do what's right for the environment and for all of the inhabitants on Earth, not just the human beings. So nature is cool. It's so cool. Just a drop of rain, what it reflects. I'll pass around these photos. Drop of rain on leaves. The shape of a deer print is in the shape of a heart. How cool is that? This, if you look close at this photo, you'll see insects sleeping inside this flower. Can you imagine sleeping inside a flower? It's magic. Even light, the sun, the way it filters through trees and bushes and the way it reflects off everything. Winter, I often get clients telling me they want color, but winter is color too. Green is a color, brown, there are millions of shades of brown. The way frost forms on berries and the woods where benevolent spirits live. There's research now that tells us, as if we need research to tell us, that nature is good for us. People who have surgery recover faster if they're looking out a window onto nature rather than a courtyard. People who have windows, or even if they have a mural on their hospital room, they need less medication, they recover faster, they report being happier. Children who have environment-based education improve their test scores on every subject. They become smarter when they spend time in nature. They have less conflict. They have higher self-esteem. They're more peaceful, balanced children when they spend time in nature. Office buildings that have plant life inside are more productive. Prisoners who are allowed to go outside have less conflicts. Nature is actually good for us. Imagine that. We all know that. When we get in nature and we spend time, our blood pressure lowers, our red blood cell count comes into balance. It's good for us. It improves our focus. It improves our concentration. We feel better about ourselves and everything around us, everyone around us. We get along better. Nature is where it's at. So I read an article once that was titled Stress Management, Try Some Trees. And the focus of this article was, if you're stressed out, find a park or find a tree, find a street with some trees and walk there. But why do we have to drive somewhere? Why do we have to find a street with trees? Why can't we have it in our own yards? Why can't we just look out every window and see nature bustling and living and thriving and buzzing and delighting us? Why do we have to kill everything and put a lawn in? So on my property, because I don't have a lawn, I have so much wildlife. I have turtles. I even have baby turtles. Every spring, I have so many baby turtles on my property. It's hysterical. And they're just adorable. And turtles can't live in lawns. You know, there's a guy out, Paul Tukey. He made a film called Chemical Reaction. And I didn't know about him, but somebody said to me, did you hear about the safe lawn movement? And I said, there's no such thing as a safe lawn. For the animals, there's no such thing as a safe lawn for the animals and the insects. And I admire him. He's focusing on pesticides. But I'm saying that pesticides are only one part of the picture. There's so much more. And we'll see that. Now, if I had had a lawn, I wouldn't have this little guy. He's so cute. I have raccoons. I have squirrels. I have chipmunks. I have toads named Janice and Eugene. I have a fox that passes through occasionally. And I have lots of deer, who I love. There you go. I also have insects. I used to have a huge vegetable garden in my yard, and one year I couldn't tend to it. Business got so busy, thank God, that I didn't have time for my vegetable garden. But what happened was, all the native plants came back up in that spot, and it turned into a beneficial insect garden. And now I'm so excited about insects, just from seeing the variety. They're so beautiful with the patterns and the shapes and even the different ways they fly. Some of them, you know, are like this tornado, and some of them, they're so acrobatic and so intense and so beautiful and so delightful that now I just have a beneficial insect garden, and I put all my vegetables in containers because I love insects so much now. I also have birds on my property. Thousands of birds, rare species, all the time, to delight. I love the way their wings sound when they're going right over my head. I love the way they sing in the morning. Did you know that when a bird sings in the morning, it helps to open the stomates of the trees so the trees can breathe? The vibration of the birds opens the breathing cells of the trees. Everything is so interconnected. And I think 80% of the bird species in the world are in decline. So we have all this fantastic, gorgeous, exciting, inspiring nature. And yet, what most of us do when we buy a property is this. We kill everything. What kind of karma is that? The first thing we do when we buy a property is kill everything on it. This property, you can see that there's a wooded area behind it. And you might think that the animals can just, you know, go over to that area. But any square mile of ecosystem can only support a certain amount of animals. So the animals that used to live in this, if they're not buried or killed by the bulldozer, then they have to go over here and have territorial disputes. And somebody's going to lose, and somebody's going to get killed. Even turtles are territorial. So this is basically death for all the inhabitants that lived here. In Florida, there's something like, they estimate 400,000 gopher turtles every year are buried under the highways that they're building. all over the place. We've undertaken mass geological alteration of the earth without considering what we're doing to the animals. So why should we care about the animals? Worldwide, we're losing animals and insects and other non-human species at 1,000 times the rate of natural selection. It's not a natural process. On Long Island specifically, in the last 50 years, we've killed half of the wildlife. And we need the wildlife. For example, squirrels, when they're burying their acorns in the fall, they bury them so that they can recover them throughout the winter, but they only recover 10% of them. What they don't recover to eat becomes an oak tree. So we have the squirrels to thank for keeping the soil of our island in place. Moles, I've just read, this is fascinating, moles actually have a purpose. As they tunnel under the ground, not only do they loosen up compact soil, but they carry beneficial fungi on their back from plant to plant. Go moles.
What do moles do?
Probably the same thing. I don't know, this article is about moles. Martins and swallows eat thousands of mosquitoes. Dragonflies and damselflies and bats also eat thousands of mosquitoes. One bat colony can eat 400,000 mosquitoes in a summer. Also, what about the trees that used to live here? Dr. Jim was talking about communicating with trees, and I've always known that the plants speak to me, because when I go shopping for plants, they all want to come with me. Please take me, please take me. And if I touch one, that's it, I have to take it, because if I don't take it, it feels rejected. And I just, you know, they definitely communicate. So the trees in my yard, one of the graduate classes, Dr. Jim gave a short course on how to communicate with trees, and then we all went back and grabbed one of the trees in my yard and listened to what it was telling us. Wow, I didn't expect what I got. My trees made me cry. All my trees in concert were telling me, thank you for not chopping them down and putting a lawn there. Every other house in the neighborhood is all chopped and there's nothing but lawn there. But my trees are still standing. They told me that I'm their girl and humans will come and go, but they're watching over me. Yeah. And all the trees that were here were keeping this soil in place. So now this soil is going to go down the street, into the storm ditch, and into the bays and oceans, where it's going to cover fish eggs, so fish eggs can't hatch. It's going to cover marine plant life, so it can't photosynthesize. It's going to get in the gills of fish, so they can't breathe. And if you keep a 24% tree and shrub canopy on your lawn, 24%, that reduces 40% stormwater runoff because it drips slowly. If you have a lawn, it kind of just slaloms across the landscape into the storm ditch, carrying pesticides and fertilizers and all the rest of it. So after we do this, this is what a lot of us do. We put in a lawn. It doesn't feed or shelter wildlife, and I wrote on the end, and it's boring. Have any of you heard of a book called Last Child in the Woods, Saving Our Children from Nature Deficit Disorder? In that book, he quotes a child as saying, and a lot of children agree, I would rather be inside because that's where all the electrical outlets are. That's so sad. And that's the way most children feel. Why would they want to be out here when their mother can see them from every window? You know, children need adventure. Children need to feel independent. Children need to discover things for themselves and to always have their mind stimulated. This is not stimulating. And it's a loss of biodiversity. This is a monoculture, a place where only one thing can survive at the expense of all other. To me, these blades of grass are like grave monuments to everything that died in order for it to be here. All those tests about how nature provides health benefits. Someone took it a step further and tested biodiverse spaces versus monocultures, and they found that the more biodiverse the space was, the more health benefits were achieved. So monoculture or biodiversity? Biodiversity is healthier for us and the planet. So as I'm giving this talk, I often get the question about, what about kids? Kids need lawns. And of course, playing fields are great for kids. I understand sports are great for kids. But these massive lawns that people have, and the fact that everybody has one, we've just gone overboard. Kids don't need lawns. I'm a little mixed up here. Okay, I'm going to sit. Kids need nature. If you give a child a toy, that child's play with that toy is limited by the mind that created that toy. There's only so many things you can do with that toy. But when a child gets out in nature, he's so stimulated. This is a picture of my niece looking at an inchworm, and she was looking at that inchworm for 45 minutes. Anybody who has kids knows that is a miracle. 45 minutes. And you can't even see the inchworm in this photograph unless you look really close. She was so fascinated. She ran in and got the magnifying glass, and she was captivated, intrigued, and inspired, and challenged by this tiny worm. Here's some more pictures. This is a series of photographs. And as you flip through, notice the boy in the picture. He's very tentative at first. He's scared. He doesn't want to climb the tree. But his sister, who's more adventurous, went right up into the tree. And then she comes back down to encourage him to get up into the tree. And by the end, this kid is the happiest kid on earth, just from climbing a tree. That's what nature does. It challenges us. And as we rise to the challenge, we grow. Nature is the best thing for kids. And kids and animals especially don't need lawns because of the pesticides that are used on lawn. The kids play on the grass. They put their hands in their mouths. And also their immune systems are not developed enough to handle the chemical pesticides. There are very high rates of cancer in children and animals because they're always playing on the grass. I have a friend who came through this course who adopted a dog from people who had the perfect lawn. And he had it for 2 years when all of a sudden, very quickly, it started to develop huge masses under its armpits, all 4 of them. And he took it to the vet, and it was such a rapidly accelerating cancer that when it died, they took it to autopsy it, and they took these tumors apart, and they found out that it was from lawn pesticides. There are countless cats that are being poisoned by pesticides. In the handouts that I gave you, in the DVD American Lawn, there's a story about a cat who was poisoned by pesticides, and it explains the whole process to you. And when pesticides are tracked in the house, you don't have the benefit of sunlight breaking them down. So once they're in the house, they're there for a very long time. And kids play on the floor also. So there are 70 million pounds of pesticides used on lawns in the United States every year. And of the most commonly used, 13 can cause cancer, 14 can cause birth defects, 11 can interfere with reproduction, 21 can damage the nervous system, and lawn pesticides have been now attributed to Parkinson's disease as well. I went on the Center for Disease Control website because that word can cause cancer and can cause, that was bothering me. What do they mean? So they have a chart with 6 categories. This probably doesn't cause cancer, the first category, and the 6th category was definitely causes cancer. The lawn pesticides are in the 5th category, meaning almost definitely they cause cancer. So we're trading in our health for green grass and for everything that represents. Pesticides jeopardize more than 375 already endangered species across the country. And this is shocking. More than 67 million songbirds every year in the United States die from pesticides. And it's not just from, they get sprayed directly, but the pesticides also contaminate their food and water supplies, and they die that way. So why do we use pesticides? Insects. Most insecticides are not species specific. They're killing broad ranges of insects. Butterflies, ladybugs, praying mantis, all of the beneficial insects are being affected by pesticides. In fact, when they sprayed DDT to kill mosquitoes way back when, they killed the wasp that kills ticks. There used to be a wasp called the Ixodyphagus hookeri wasp. And that wasp used to lay its eggs in the tick nymph and kill it before the ticks even hatch. And there was a balance. And when they sprayed the DDT, they killed most of those wasps. And now we have a tick explosion. They would have been better off enlisting the help of purple martins or swallows or bats or dragonflies. They could have taken care of. That's the way nature would have taken care of it. And we wouldn't have created this other problem. The National Wildlife Federation did a study called What Are Bugs Worth? And they estimated that native insects perform $57 billion in useful services every year that we can't provide. $57 billion. Free of charge they do that. And yet we're killing them with pesticides. We need the insects. We're all interconnected. Birds need insects too. And lots of species need insects in order to survive. So when I get something that I really have to treat, in fact, most of the time we don't even treat the insect infestations. If I have an aphid infestation, we just wait and the birds come and eat the aphids. Very rarely do I have to use any type of control. If we just wait for nature to take care of it, it does. If I do have to do something about an insect problem, I hire bugs. I hire ladybugs or praying mantises or trichogamma wasps to take care of it for me. And this is a company called Green Methods that will send you insect eggs to use on your property.
You have two praying mantises in the green.
Yeah, we do. Yep. This is a photograph of a tomato hornworm that was in my vegetable garden. And this has been parasitized by a trichogamma wasp. The trichogamma wasp laid its eggs right in the flesh of the worm. And now you can see the eggs hatching out. But what's great about this photo is that I didn't order the trichogamma wasp. It was there because I'm not spraying pesticides. Getting back to kids, my niece had a toy the other day. It was a little, I don't know, I'm not technologically up on things, but it was some kind of, video game. Aunt Sue, come quick, I'm saving animals. I had to go see this. She's got this little implement and she's, the animals are running and getting killed and she's saving them by clicking on them or something. And she said, the way she said it was, I'm saving animals, come see. And I said, well, Gracie, you're pretending to save animals. She said, yeah, I'm pretending to save animals. But I didn't have the heart to tell her that creating that device that she was using killed countless animals. Interesting. The kids are being hoodwinked. She really thought she was doing something good, but that device killed thousands of animals, just destroyed ecosystems. We have things wired incorrectly on this planet. Kids need silence also, time to think, and nature provides that. Kids need to calm down sometimes. Nature is perfect for that. And silence is a basic human need. There's a lot of work about silence. Even if you just look up silence on the internet, you'll get a lot of fascinating information about how good it is for us and how impossible it is to find these days. Here we are out there with our blowers and weed whackers and lawn mowers and everything, and we can't hear the earth anymore. We can't hear the wind and the birds and the crickets. I love crickets. So another reason we use pesticides is herbicides, weeds. And again, when we have a lawn, The only thing that's allowed to live there, and this, I'm talking about extreme cases, the only thing that's allowed to live there is this, what's in the seed grass mix. So, and anything else that's there, whether it's native or not, is gone. I mean, the botanical definition of a weed is a plant that's growing where you don't want it. So when you have a lawn, everything else is a weed. Doesn't matter who's depending on it, what good it's going to do for us doesn't matter. The lawn is king, and everything else gets killed. So I have these 3 books here. Identifying and Harvesting Edible and Medicinal Plants by Steve Brill, who's the wild man. He gives tours, he teaches you how to harvest and eat plants. And all these tags here represent native plants. And he's talking about how to use them to eat, cosmetically, medicinally, or maybe just, to put fragrance in your house. But very useful plants. This book, called Weeds in My Garden, Observations on Misunderstood Plants, is going to tell you what animal depends on which plant, who eats the berries, who drinks the nectar, and also how the plant creates nutrition in the soil or purifies the air. This book, the No-Till Weed Identifying Guide, was created by the Cyanamide Company. It's the same plants. The same plants, many of which are native plants, but they're going to tell you what chemical to kill it with and how to be really careful that you don't get sick from these chemicals. For me, I would rather have the plants for me and all of the other species than use a chemical to kill it. So another type of pesticide is fungicides. Did Jeff talk about Paul Stamets at all? You should write this name down, I swear. Paul Stamets, S-T-A-M-E-T-S. Fascinating work he's doing. He wrote a book called How Mushrooms Will Save the World. And you just read a little bit or you watch him talk on YouTube and you're a believer. He's using funguses to clean up the Chernobyl site. He's using funguses to clean the area where Saddam Hussein sprayed nerve gas on the Kurds. He's using funguses to clean up where Agent Orange has been used. He's using it to clean up oil spills. And he's also discovered that funguses, he calls it the mycelial network under our feet. And they actually communicate in very much the same way that humans communicate with each other. Neurotransmitters are very similar to human communication. And if there's a tree in the middle of the forest that's in deep shade, but has been there for a long time, how is it even surviving? It's because the trees on the edge of the forest are actually sending nutrition through the mycelial network to that tree. In fact, plant life couldn't survive without funguses. And yet these broad spectrum fungicides, which we put down to save our lawns, are being killed. And funguses are extremely useful. They're cool, first of all. I think they're really cool looking. They break down wood and turn it into components that other plants can use. But I believe that funguses can save the world. S-T-A-M-E-T-S. Paul Stamets. He does a lot of talking on the internet, and he's also very well published writer. So just to recap about pesticides. In the 1940s, there were 1.5 million tons of industrial chemicals created in the United States every year. Now we're making 200 million tons every year. And these are chemicals that the planet Earth cannot deal with. Thomas Berry says the extinctions that are taking place have not been equaled in 65 million years. We're not just entering another historical period or another cultural modification. We're changing the chemistry of the planet. We're changing the biosystems and the geosystems on a scale of hundreds of millions of years of life development. I just read 2 days ago in the World Wildlife Federation monthly newsletter. They do every year what's called the Living Planet Index. And they say that humanity's ecological footprint now exceeds the Earth's ability to produce renewable resources and absorb CO2. We now use the resources of 1.5 Earths every year. Scary. We're in trouble. Our kids are in trouble. Our kids' kids are in trouble. And not only our kids, but the children of all the creatures. Did Jeff say, you know, we have to make sure we take care of all the children of all the creatures all the time. But human beings are using the resources of 1.5 Earths every year. There's a piece in your handout from a book called Noah's Garden. And what it's talking about is that every single organism on Earth has a minute portion of the intelligence that makes the whole Earth work together. And every time we remove one and something goes extinct, we're not just removing that one piece, we're removing everything it's connected to also. And she said the land has become so stupid as a result that it can't take care of itself, much less take care of us. We really have to honor all of the little life forms and realize that we're all connected and we all need each other, and every species on Earth has a job to do. So kids also need water. We're getting back to the, you know, kids don't need lawn. Kids need water. 97% of the water on Earth is salt water. That leaves only 3% fresh water for all the humans and animals. But 2% of it is polluted. So that leaves only 1% for the humans and all the animals. And yet, during the summer months, we use 80% of our water on lawns. Out west, where it's hot all year, they use 80% of their water on lawns. In Phoenix, Arizona, they're taking water from the Colorado River to the point where the Colorado River crosses into Mexico, into the Sea of Cortez, it is completely dried up. And there's intense friction between the United States and Mexico now, because in Phoenix, they're taking all the water out to use their lawns. A couple of classes ago, we had somebody here from Phoenix, and he goes, yeah, I know what you're talking about. It's true. They shouldn't have lawns in Phoenix. That is an ecosystem where the lawn doesn't belong. Well, I don't think it belongs anywhere, but especially, that's how ingrained the notion is that we have to have lawns. We're destroying the earth because of it. When you have tall grass, the grass has a much deeper root system. Also, it shades the soil, so there's less soil water evaporation. So you don't need water. And it's cool looking. Tall grass is cool. I love walking through it, brushing against it. You know, all the different seed pods of the grass, they're just beautiful. They're intricate, and their design is amazing. So fertilizers. We use 3 million tons of fertilizers in the United States on lawns. That's squandered resources right there. From the production, transportation, and application of these fertilizers, the pollution created is equal to driving your car 440 miles, every one of us. The nutrients of fertilizer runoff, which I was talking a little about before, destroy aquatic ecosystems. In fact, there are black zones all over the country and all over the world where nothing is alive because of the excess nitrogen in the water. What happens is the Gulf of Mexico is one. That's what they were talking about when they're saying it's already a black zone and now this. The Chesapeake Bay, there's another black zone. Because when nitrogen, 60% of the nitrogen applied to lawns ends up in water. And when the nitrogen enters the water, it feeds the algae, and there's what's called an algae bloom. But then it can't sustain. And when the algae dies off, it takes all the oxygen with it and kills everything. What was it? Yeah.
They spent so much money trying to figure out how it came from.
It's from septic systems, but it's also from over-fertilization, and that's why Suffolk County has now created laws where you can only fertilize at certain times of the year. It doesn't address the over-fertilization and the need to fertilize at all, which is another issue, which I'll get to. So gasoline usage, more than 600 million gallons of gas are used every year to power lawn equipment. And the EPA estimates that More than 17 million gallons of fuel are spilled every year. That's going into our waterways. That's evaporating into our air. That's sitting there in our environment, killing soil life, killing insects. And 17 million gallons is more than was spilled in the Gulf of Alaska by the Gulf of Valdez. Every year we're spilling that for lawn equipment. Emissions. Kids need air to breathe, right? We all need air to breathe. And yet lawnmowers have no emission standards. 1 hour of power mowing equals the same in pollution as driving 350 miles by car. Oh God. There are several studies. Some put it up as high as driving 1,300 miles by car. Some put it down as low as 100. The difference is different models. The older the model of lawnmower and newer cars, you know, the ratio is different. But an average is 350 miles by car, 1 hour of lawn mowing. Staggering. And per hour of operation, a lawnmower emits 10 to 12 times as much hydrocarbons as a typical auto. A string trimmer emits 21 times more, and a leaf blower emits 34 times more. I'm always trying to get my crew to put down the leaf blowers, but there have been studies done that compare the efficacy of a leaf blower with rakes, and they figure out it takes the same amount of time to blow as it does to rake. In the state of California, all blowers have a warning, like cigarettes have, that says emissions from this machine cause cancer.
Well, don't packs of cigarettes have the same kind of warning?
Yeah. Yeah. Blowers, cigarettes. So kids need air to breathe, water, they need a clean soil, but they also need a planet to live on. A UN Commission report called the Millennium Ecosystem Report Assessment concluded that 60% of the life-supporting functions on Earth are in decline. Scary stuff. Human beings have changed ecosystems more profoundly in the past 50 years than at any other time in the history of the Earth. This is real. So kids need an ecosystem, not an ecosystem. They need health and vitality, and they need a clean, pure planet to live on. So other things that my company and I don't do whenever we can, or at least on my own property. I don't deadhead, because before the advent of birdseed, guess what birds ate? Seed. They still do. And so we don't cut the seeds off. And seeds are gorgeous. That's a bonus. Absolutely gorgeous. Check out these seeds. Another reason we don't cut things back is because beneficial insects overwinter in plant stalks. So when you take that away, you're reducing your beneficial insect population. Not only that, when a plant is left standing perennial, for example, if you don't cut it back, it's kind of strong in the fall and the winter, and when you go back in the spring, it's brittle, and it's like evaporated. Where did all that stuff go? Where did all that matter go? It went back into the soil as nourishment for next year's plants. If you don't cut back the stalks, also you have, if they stay strong through the winter, as in the case of peonies, you have stakes for next year. I haven't cut down peonies in a long time, and they're stronger as a result because they're getting all that nourishment from what exudates, and the stalks provide staking for the coming year. Another thing we don't do is rake leaves, my goodness. There was an article that was published in the Southampton Press just a few weeks ago, and that's also in your handout, about why I love leaves. I love leaves. They crunch when you walk on them. They're brilliantly colored. They provide food for the soil food web. If you have a handful of soil, you have more life forms in your hand than there are human beings on the planet. And that whole food web begins with the leaf litter. That's what they need to begin the whole cycle that's under there. All the life is dependent on leaf litter. And when you take that away, your trees are mourning. The trees are crying all over the place these days. Where are you taking my leaves? they give back to the soil what they take up in the spring. And then when the soil food web breaks down those leaves, it gives back to the trees. It's a symbiosis. It's a natural cycle. There are so many insects that live under the leaves. When you see birds, you know, sometimes if you're out walking, you think you're alone and you hear something. That's the birds pushing the leaves away to get the insects that are underneath. Not only hawks and owls also harvest what's under the leaves. Turtles live in the leaves. That is why they're colored like this, because they need leaves to live in. And the turtles are now on the New York State Special Concerns list, in great part because we're taking their homes away when we rake their leaves. And another great thing about leaves is that animals build their homes out of them. So many animals need leaves in order to build their homes. And animals, insects lay their eggs on the undersides of leaves. This is a monarch butterfly chrysalis on the bottom of a squash leaf. Another thing I don't do is chop down dead trees. I love dead trees. They're the coolest things.
Southampton Town does too, actually. They don't want you to cut down dead trees anymore.
Good, great. They're a very important part of the ecosystem. Not only do they exudate, in the same way that I just explained, the perennial stalks exudate back into the soil, but even a tree limb, if the tree limb dies, it's going to give all of its energy back to the tree. And when a tree dies, it gives all of its nutrients and energy to the surrounding plant communities. Not only that, they're homes for wildlife. Salamanders live in the bottom. There's one photograph there, not the best photograph in there, but it's just a dead tree stalk. And you can count 13 dwellings in that dead tree. In that one, yeah. A perfect example of why we should leave dead trees for the animals to live in. So for me, I'm a gardener, but I'm also a wildlife rescuer. I'm on the board of directors of the Wildlife Rescue Center. So, you know, a lot of people think that since I'm a gardener, I'm supposed to hate wildlife. But for me, what's really fascinating is the interdependent, co-evolutionary relationship between the animals and the plants. And native plants are the thing for sustaining the wildlife. For example, this is not a great photo. It's cinnamon fern. It's native. And the cinnamon part, hummingbirds harvest it and line their nests with it to keep mites away from the babies. Super cool. And then there's the issue of deer. Everybody thinks I'm supposed to hate deer because I'm a gardener, but I love deer. And there was a researcher called Dr. Margareta Bergman. She did a study that proved that deer saliva stimulates plant growth when it's a native plant. And I've seen this over and over again, and every time I see it, I point it out to the closest person because it's so hard to believe, but it's true. She did control groups. Deer saliva stimulates plant growth. I've seen it.
Well, that's true.
Think about it.
That's true with the cows now, and when it pulls grass, it protects the wound on it where it tears the grass.
Right.
And then all that moisture on their nose, when it touches the ground, is fertilizer.
Yeah. Where there was one shoot, now there's 10 or 20. Think about it. In an ecosystem where the plants have survived and the deer have survived together for so many years, why would the deer eat their plants down to the ground? It doesn't make sense. How could they have survived together? They're both benefiting each other. And the way the deer benefit the plants is by stimulating their growth. It's just like pruning. And when deer eat, they just nibble a little, they keep going, they nibble a little, they keep going, they nibble a little, they keep going. They don't eat a whole plant to the ground unless their ecosystem has been tampered with. We're the ones who have gotten it so out of balance. This is a tree called, a plant called native primrose. I love this thing, and before I had my awakening, I used to pull these things out by the millions. They were a weed, right? You're taught they're a weed. But they flower, and I can't even tell you how many animals eat the leaves. And then when they're done flowering, the birds eat the seeds. This is my favorite plant. pokeweed. This is one that the deer eat all season, and they stimulate its growth. And everybody thinks it's a weed. And the birds eat the berries, and it's so cool looking. It's beautiful.
Is that
Pokeweed, yep.
You can't get it out if you want to, so you might as well leave it there.
I love them. I'm so delighted whenever I see a new one coming up. So more about native plants. There are several different grades of native plants. So there's Long Island native plants, and within Long Island native plants is wetland plants, there's oak forest plants, and then there's Northeast natives, and there's East Coast natives, and Northern natives, and there's United States natives. So when you're looking for native plants, you know, do a little homework and find out. If it depends on how pure you want to be. You know, there's also within Long Island natives, there's Long Island genotypes if you're a real purist. But with so many beautiful native plants to choose from, just choose native. Phlox is native. Echinacea is native. Asclepias, butterfly weed, is native. This is a meadow that Jim and I and Jeff, this is where that tree is, Sephamoji. And this is a 20-acre native plant meadow. There are a few plants that aren't native that the owner just had to have. But for the most part, it's all native plants, or if it's not native, the plants were chosen because they're going to feed songbirds or feed hummingbirds or feed butterflies, and they're not invasive. And we started this meadow, it took us 1 year and 6 months to complete. But just this summer, we started it the summer before this past one, and this summer, it's so cool. One day there were mosquitoes there, and the very next day there were probably about 20,000 damsel and dragonflies there. It was one of the coolest experiences I've ever had in gardening. I love dragonflies, but they were just darting and weaving everywhere. And there are some roads through this meadow because it's so big, but they weren't over the roads. They were just over the meadow. And then a few weeks later, there were swallows. Ah, it was heavenly. There were swallows darting, weaving, and they did the same thing. When they got out to the road, they turned around and came back to the meadow. It was obvious that they were there for the meadow because this is a place that was welcoming them. Yeah, there's hawks there. 2 different kinds of hawks we've seen. And now when you walk through, because we haven't deadheaded anything, there are finches flying up all over as you walk through. It's incredible.
Did they plant these or they use natural? Oh, they plant.
No, yep. So I'm just going to pass around some more photos of native plants. I have perennials, trees, and shrubs here for you guys to all look at. And in closing, does anybody get the Funny Times? It's a great publication, the Funny Times. But there was this one little frame there with presumably President George Bush on the phone. He's screaming it. He's in the Oval Office and he's saying, "Don't talk to me about the planet. This is America, not some damn planet." Right. Okay, so don't talk to me about the ecosystem. This is my yard, not some damn ecosystem. The ecosystem is everywhere. The Holy Land is everywhere, everywhere. And the great thing about this gardening paradigm is that you don't have to go to town meetings. You don't have to write away to your senator. You don't have to join an organization. You can do this yourself. If you have 1 acre of lawn, give 1/4 of an acre back. There are 50 million acres of residential turf grass in the United States. And if everybody gave back 1/2 of what they have, that would save 25 million acres. If everybody gave back 1/4, that would be 12.5 million acres. If you can't feed 100 people, feed just one. Mother Teresa said that. But if you can't save 50 million acres, save 1/4 of an acre. Save 1/8 of an acre. Save something for the other creatures on Earth. Dalai Lama said that compassion is the new radicalism of our time. Compassion, not just for humans, but for all the creatures. And Elizabeth Janeway, I don't know who she is, but this is my favorite quote. Individual advances turn into social change when enough of them occur. If you and you and you and all of us in this room took on this paradigm, imagine the change that would be created. Astounding what one person can do, what a few people can do. Do I have time for questions? If there are any. Does anybody have any questions?
I have one.
Yeah.
Excuse me. The concern of Lyme disease, how do you control the ticks on your property with the deer?
The birds.
The birds do. You've never
I
got-
hardly ever get any ticks on my property.
Oh, okay.
Yep. And I'm thinking that since I don't spray fungicides and pesticides, whatever is keeping them in check is present.
Okay.
I'm not killing them. I'm not saying I never get ticks,
Okay.
but I go on a property, you know, that they're spraying pesticides, and I'm there for a minute and I have ticks all over me.
Okay.
And I'm doing nothing on my property, and it's fine. And there are no more ticks in tall grass than there are in short grass.
Yeah.
That's documented. None. It's the same. Chickens, fowl. Yep. Any other? No, no more. So we have another guest, another part of the talk from the Wildlife Rescue Center, here to talk to you about why you shouldn't use pesticides and rake your leaves, et cetera, et cetera. And this is a picture of this baby when she first came to us at the rescue center.
This is the ambassador.
And this is Catherine Schelt.
I am a wildlife rehabilitator. I work with Suzanne at Wildlife Rescue. And you stole my opening line. Want to get rid of ticks? Have a flock of chickens at home. We should all, at this point in time, have a flock of chickens in our yard. It's necessary. You gotta start growing your own food. The beef that we eat, the lamb that we eat, the pork, the chickens, it's all got pesticides and hormones and genetically modified feed. So we're poisoning ourselves as well as our planet. We need to stop doing this. We need to understand how to live in harmony with the creatures that are in our yard. I released some possums the other day. Amazing, amazing animals, the possum. They are one of the best things you can have in your yard because they eat everything we don't want. Well, the people who own the property next to where I was releasing the animals came out and started screaming at me that my possums were going to give her free-roaming cats rabies. We need to understand the environment we live in. She's living in the woods. She has no idea that possums don't get rabies. Possums eat everything you don't want. Slugs, snails, carrion, rotten fruit, garbage. So, and they live in harmony with cats. They come and they actually eat the cat food and sit and live in harmony with the cats. But she had no idea what she was living with, that these were the neighbors that belonged. She actually called somebody to complain about me and was told that I have to do my job and I have to put them back where they live. And that's where their mother was hit by the car, and that's why they were coming back to her neighborhood. But foxes have a purpose. Raccoons have a purpose. Red-tailed hawks, vultures, they all have a purpose. Talking about vultures or mentioning vultures, we're lucky that we're starting to see them again in Suffolk County because vultures are ground nesting birds. When their babies are born, they are very vulnerable to predation by free-roaming and feral cats. We're losing our vultures. We're losing our quails, our bob whites, our nighthawks. Pheasants aren't indigenous. But, you know, all of our indigenous birds. I go to Suzanne's property to hear the whippoorwill because there's so few of them left. And it's because we don't understand the damage that our free-roaming animals are doing. We don't understand the damage that our pesticides are doing, that our herbicides are doing. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get people to understand how important it is, particularly at this point of our evolution, to try and save what's left. When you think about all the animals that were impacted by the Gulf oil spill, the seabirds, the dolphins, the shorebirds, it just, one major accident like that can wipe out an entire species. Brown pelicans were already in trouble. And then they get hit with this man-made disaster. They may never recover. They're seeding now the scallops, I think. Isn't that what they're putting back out? They're having problems with that already because the whelk population is so overgrown in our bays that the seeded scallops don't have a chance. They're losing enormous numbers of them because the system is so out of balance.
We lost the scallops because of the excess nitrogen.
Right, right. When
There's hardly any life in our bays anymore.
when they reintroduced the wolves out west, they started to get the elk population under control. The forests are responding. The flora out there is coming back to what it's supposed to be. When we started getting our bison back, the meadows, the grasslands started to come back to what they were intended to be. If we mind our own business and let nature take its course, the planet responds almost immediately and says thank you. You know, people are just so surprised at the animals that we have here. We rescued a red fox, and the guy says, "Does that come from here?" Well, yes, he does. We have foxes, we have turkeys, we have amazing, amazing creatures. Box turtles. And they put up with so much, they really do. When you think it's 5 acres of land that they live on for their entire 100-year life, and then we come in and we clear cut and we put up a house or houses, there goes their 5 acres. There's not a lot of places for them to live in that, especially in places like the one picture Suzanne shows of a house that's got absolutely nothing. There is no place for them. We got a box turtle in probably the size of a 50-cent piece. He came in with an eye infection. They picked those up from the fertilizers we're using, from the pesticides we're using. By the time they got him to the vet that could help him, both of his eyes were infected. And he's so tiny, we don't even know if there's anything we can do for him. But it's amazing just to sit out in your yard quietly and watch the things that come by, including these guys. She came to Wildlife Rescue because she fell out of her nest tree. Their nest trees are 50 to 60 feet tall. We need to keep our mature trees around. When she fell out of the tree, she broke both her wings and fractured her pelvis. So we couldn't put her back with her parents because she was injured. She's a fully flighted bird. Will you open your wings for me? No, not today. But because she's imprinted on humans, when she came in, she didn't have her eyes open, because birds don't have their eyes open when they're born. And the first thing they see, their brain is hardwired to accept as their parents. They're not self-aware, so when she opened her eyes, this is what she thinks she looks like. This is what she thinks she looks like. She doesn't know she's an owl. So unfortunately, she's condemned to being with humans for the rest of her life, because if we let her go and she got into trouble, couldn't find enough food, couldn't find enough water, whatever reason she got into trouble, the first human she saw, she would come flying for. Talons first, and the people would go, oh my gosh, she's attacking. And they would get hurt or she would get hurt, and it's not a good thing. But, because you can see those talons. She has the gripping power of the bald eagle. She is Suffolk County's #1 predator. She is one of the most successful hunters in the wild world. They have what's called silent flight. The feathers on their wings have special adaptations that break up the air, and the prey doesn't hear them coming. She uses her ears to find the prey, uses her eyes to sight where it is, uses her wings to come in and grab them. The talons, once she gets them in her talons, it's almost over. And then uses that beak to take it apart and eat it. This is because they don't have teeth, so whatever food they swallow has fur and bones. They can't digest the fur, they can't digest the bones. Their gizzard, the area, yes, I know you're going to bite me, right underneath her chin here, has special features in it that create these pellets, and she spits them back up. That's about the only way you're ever going to be able to find an owl in a tree. If you look at her coloring, when she's up against the bark of the trees that she's in, with the ears being what they, ears, shame on me, with those tufts of feathers, she looks like she's part of the tree. There's an owl that comes to her cage at night, and we can hear him. We know he's out there, but we've yet to be able to find him. And the two of them talk to each other, but he's so well camouflaged that it's nearly impossible to find him. There are wineries out in California that are taking advantage of the natural predators. They have, they put up utility poles because red-tailed hawks are stationary hunters. They come and they land on the utility poles, and they see and hear the rodents in the row covers and come down and keep the rodents out of the vines. So they're encouraging the natural predators to do the job. It saves them so much money. If people learned to leave their leaves on their lawns, it would save them so much money, because you don't have to fertilize, because nature does that for you. Any questions?
What type of owl is it?
This is a great horned. I'm sorry, I should have introduced her. This is a great horned owl. She's one of the larger owls. Great gray, I think, is bigger than her. And I think the snowy might be bigger than her too, but it's rare, really, really. If you ever see a snowy owl in Suffolk County, count yourself blessed, because...
They show up fairly often. It's with Smith Point Park.
Okay, okay.
I think it all depends again on the migration of food.
Right, right. See, and people don't realize that owls are migratory birds. Wildlife Rescue got one in one year. The bird had a band on it, and the band indicated that it had been banded in buffalo.